When my mother passed on, I inherited an archive of my family in wartime. These images and objects were from a very specific time and place, but the puzzle was to ascribe a particular story to the image. As a child, from my hiding place behind the stairs, I spied on my father and his friends. They were retelling war stories and laughing over shared experiences. This was assisted with a really large bottle of scotch. Decades later, I struggled to remember the names and places, so I got help from a scattering of remaining veterans. In doing this, I discovered a gold mine of stories. These stories are from a very local group of vets and their families from Vancouver Island in British Columbia. I've had help from the Legions in Ladysmith, Shawnigan Lake, and Cheminius. As I recorded the stories, I felt a tremendous sense of gratitude and respect for these people who fought and contributed to making Canada such a safe place to live. These are their stories.
Yeah, my mother was a nurse during the First World War.
Oh.
And I've got a photograph of her somewhere. My dad was he was a cavalryman. He was cross bandoliers and jodhpurs and spurs. And
Wow.
he looked fantastic. All my uncles were in the First World War. My Uncle Bob was shot in the chest at the Battle of the Somme.
Oh my gosh.
And he lay for 4 days in a shower hole. And they kept passing him by thinking he was dead, the Red Cross people. And he finally managed to raise his hand, but he lived, but he never married. He was badly shell-shocked, and he couldn't speak properly. My elder brother was a medic in Italy. He was a year older than me, but he joined up a year after me. He waited till he was called up. And then my kid brother was a regimental sergeant major in the Manchester Regiment. My introduction to Anzio was in March. The Anzio landings took place in January, and terrible casualties, just horrendous casualties, because the Germans encircled the whole beachhead, and they were in the hills just around the beachhead, so they had complete observation of the beach area. Anything that moved during the day, they could direct shell fire on it, and landing craft coming in during the day was subject to tremendous gunfire too. The landing craft I came in on in March, the doors had just opened, and we had a replacement Jeep. Our previous Jeep had been destroyed. We had a Royal Marine driver driving it, and as it was coming down the ramp, a German shell hit just to one side of the landing craft, rocked it. He jumped out of the Jeep and ran up the beach to get out of the way, because he knew the next one was going to be either to the other side or in the middle, and it hit the landing craft. And I'm up the beach by this time, and my sub-lieutenant, and he shouted, "Hughes, get that damn truck off there. We need that truck." It had the radio in the back, the new radio. And I ran up, and he told me what to do. I'd never driven before in my life. He told me what to do. Pressed the button, started it, stuck it in gear, and as I'm coming down, another shell lands on the other side of the landing craft, and it goes up and down again. But I got it off up the beach, and he gave me a smack on the back. He said, "Great, get by the wall." I got out, and the next one hit the back of the next shell that came. There was 3 of them came, one on each side, and the next one was supposed to hit dead on. They had it ranged, but it didn't. It hit just at the back and set some trucks on fire. So the back of the landing craft was on fire. And then they decided to get off the beach because they knew darn well. So it backed up and went out into the ocean again. But that was my introduction to Anzio. The Jeep, as I started up, and this other shell goes off just one side. I've got the windshield is up, and there's a metal stanchion on both sides holding the Jeep windshield. And something hits the stanchion here and cuts it right in half, and it's right by my head. It cuts the stanchion right in half, and the whole windshield comes down into my lap as I'm driving it off.
Oh my God.
Another couple of inches to one side, it would have taken my head off.
Wow.
Yeah. But basically, you know, our basic job was to bring in the landing craft. We were called a beach signal party.
Oh.
And we signal the landing craft which area to come into. We started to bring them in at night, and we had coloured lights for them because the Germans couldn't see them. They were direct out to sea. And it was much safer for them to come in at dusk or at night. And we had panels during the day. If we could get them into the port of Anzio itself, you know, that was basically our job. And communicating back and forward between the warships, directing gunfire on targets from the forward observation officer. So we were the communication center for the beach. And so all the messages used to come through us, our casualty figures used to come through us. We used to get the whole lot. And one of my other jobs on the beach was as a coder. I had all the confidential books to look after. And I used to, well, every message on, every radio message is coded. At night, we used to get the planes come over. We had what they called CAP. American fighters used to come over during the day and keep the beachhead clear during the day. So they couldn't, you know, no German planes would come. 5 o'clock on the nose, when the CAP used to go back to the base, the German planes would come over, and they'd bomb the beach and machine gun the beach, you know, make runs up and down the beach, and there was no opposition to them except anti-aircraft fire. There must have been 100 ships offshore, including warships, and one of them was a very famous one. They called it the Pepper Pot because it had been in action so often. It was all peppered with shrapnel all over. She was a heavy cruiser, and one of the planes put a glider bomb right into the magazine, and the whole ship just disappeared with all the crew. Wow. 828 guys died, just pow, like that, just gone. During the same raid, there's a light cruiser, HMS Spartan. That gets hit, and there was 228 guys killed on that. The hospital ship, the St. David, was hit. There's another hospital ship, the Fitzgerald, that was hit. So these were all hit with glider bombs. So there's massive losses at sea as well as on land. After Italy, I was shipped out to Yugoslavia and joined the Marshal Tito's partisans on a little tiny island, only 10 miles by about 5. Little tiny island in the Adriatic. And all the islands all the way around, including the mainland, were occupied by the Germans. So we were absolutely isolated. At that particular time, it was June 1944 when we went over by motor gunboat after the breakout from Anzio, and joined up with the No. 2 Commando under the command of Major Jack Churchill. And we always operated with them. I was actually a Royal Naval Commando, and we operated with the 42 Royal Marine Commando. Wherever they went, we usually went with them. Very interesting 6 months with the partisans. And we took part in 3 operations. One, a small island called Midjeti. We took the German garrison out. And we stayed on the beach all the time. We didn't go into action. We stayed. It was our job to bring them into the beach and bring them off the beach and to defend the beach. So that was our job. We also did a major operation on the island of Brach, Big Island. That was quite a disaster. Well, our commanding officer was killed, a New Zealander. And Jack Churchill was wounded and taken prisoner. And we lost 22 Royal Marines there. You know. Partly due to some aircraft that we had brought in. They asked for air support. We radioed it to the air command to bring the aircraft in. Unfortunately, they hit the wrong position. They hit the Marines to evacuate the island. And there was quite heavy losses with the partisans too. They were supposed to hook up with us, which they never did do. They landed at a different spot, and they were supposed to hook up with us, but they didn't. A lot of Russian influence.
Oh.
A lot of they had Russian political officers with them, and they were very, very anti-British, anti-American. As the war was coming to an end, in the end of 1944, our unit was disbanded, and I had to say goodbye to all my friends. And I was shipped. I was just myself. I was shipped out back to Bari in Italy. Then I went by a captured Italian cruiser back to Malta, and in Malta they put me aboard the British cruiser, the HMS Belfast. It's the vessel that took me out to the Far East. We got as far as Ceylon, and they put me ashore in Ceylon. And I was sent to a jungle training camp called Mount Lavinia, and then we were shipped over to Trincomalee by truck. We went aboard a landing craft, and we were shipped out to a place called Mabon on the Burmese coast. So again, we were guiding vessels into the entrance of the river. Well, I have the greatest respect for the people that fought there during the war, the 14th Army. I was only there for 2 months before they dropped the atom bomb. And after the atom bomb was dropped, they brought us off the beach back to Trincomalee, put us aboard a landing craft. We set sail for Singapore to take the surrender of Singapore. We were on this landing craft with all the trucks and everything on it. And we landed in Singapore. We were there for 2 days. Took quite a few vessels up. Then our destination was Hong Kong. So we went from Ceylon to Singapore and then up to Hong Kong. We took the surrender of the Japanese in Hong Kong. And I've got photographs of them that coming in with the rifles ready to surrender to us. And,
wow.
You know,
well, 1940, it was winter time. I'm relating what my mother's been telling me the past few years. The Germans came into our house before Christmas and took Mom and I to a holding pen, so to speak, where they had cattle and all that. Then they took us to a delousing situation, room where everybody had to get stripped naked and get deloused. Yeah, well, I got lost. I couldn't find my mother because everybody's naked. I couldn't find my mom. I was crying and crying.
Oh, no.
So she found me. And a few days later, they said, well, you're going to this camp, and you're going there, and so on. My mother and I were delegated to go to this one farm in a little place called Linter. I have photographs here and all that. And that was a farm, a working farm. So they had 25 or 30 head of cattle, milking cows. And in those days, especially in Germany, all the stalls were right next to the kitchen. You open the door like here, and there's the first stall. Well, they took the first stall out, whitewashed it, put a bed in there and a chair, and that was our bedroom.
Oh my gosh.
And that's where we lived till 1940, well, at the end of 1945 when the war ended. But during that time, I was not mistreated. We're Catholics, and the farm headman, Mr. Stuckenberg, he had to abide by the rules of the German army or the German government. So he was, I think they call him SS man. He was ready all for Hitler, and his wife wasn't. And she took me under her wing. Anytime there was a a raid coming through. She'd take me into the bunker until the planes were gone again. I guess I was considered part of the family.
Wow.
My mom wasn't. And on Sundays, she'd go on a bike, go to church. And I'd be one of her passengers on the back of her bike.
She'd take you with them.
She would take me. But we had to have a P all the time, right here somewhere.
Oh, okay.
And P was for Polish.
Oh, okay.
And I was a little kid and I had to have one on the back. But I was allowed to go to church once a month to the church in that town. There's only the daughter that was living in the farm. All the kids were gone. Four sons were gone in the war, including my good friend Clemens.
Oh,
I was born in 1938.
wow, yeah.
Because she was excellent to me, excellent. And she was pretty good to my mother too, providing her husband didn't see it. Because he had to abide by the rules of the German government. Canadian, British, American, and UK Army came through and went through every farm looking for people like us. Because we're, in actual fact, prisoners of them. We're just slaves. At least my mother was. My dad was in the Polish Army at that time when they burst into our bedroom to get us. We didn't know where he was. He was captured also. This we didn't know until end of the war. He was captured and he was sent to a labor camp about 30, 40 kilometers away from us. But we didn't know that. My dad and my mom got reunited thanks to the Red Cross.
Wow.
Some milkmen in that area knew us, and when my dad got liberated from wherever he was, he told them, he said, there's a young family there with a little boy, and I think his name is Stanislav. And my dad said, well, that could be my child.
Wow.
So one thing led to another, and then Dad got a hold of some more Red Cross people, and they came over, and there was my mom and dad. And I haven't seen my dad for, 5 years?
Wow.
About 6 years. So then, 1948, my dad was working for the Allied forces in different camps, following them around. And the Canadian government opened up the floodgates for all DPs, displaced persons. That's what we're called, DPs. So Dad didn't know where to go, but his friend said, well, I'm going to Canada. I signed up for Canada. So Dad said, oh, okay, well, I'll sign up too. So that's how we ended up in Canada, in Thunder Bay, Port Arthur, 1948. 15, I joined Sea Cadets. I loved it. I loved Sea Cadets.
What did you like about it?
Well, Thunder Bay is the head of Lake Superior. Summertime, see all these Canadian warships come in, 2 or 3 of them for the weekend. And because I was in Sea Cadets, I was allowed to go aboard and have a tour. Oh my God, this life is for me. At 17 and a half, I joined. Went from, right across the Bury where my dad worked was HMCS Griffin. That's a naval base. Yeah. And that's where Sea Cadets and reserves, and that's why I signed up in the Navy. So it wasn't too far to go. Starting at 12 o'clock, you'll see where I signed up in the Navy in boot camp, and then every handle has another ship, another ship, another ship, and the dates on it. So when I joined from HMCS Griffin, that's Thunder Bay, almost every big town had some kind of a base, either Navy, Army, or Air Force. Well, Thunder Bay happened to be at the head of Lake Superior, and that was Navy. First one was HMCS New Waterford. From New Waterford, I went to Sussexville, HMCS Sussexville. And then they said, HMCS Cape Breton, which was a coal carrier, troop carrier, and a floating workshop. To a destroyer, HMCS Skeena, my first destroyer. Saskatchewan, HMCS Saskatchewan, another beautiful ship that I loved. It was a training squadron ship. I did about 3 years on that one. From HMCS Mackenzie, you're going back to HMCS Saskatchewan again. Okay, you have to go to another ship now. HMCS Mackenzie again.
Oh my God.
So I did 14 years in the training squadron. HMCS Terra Nova. That was my last destroyer. Technical Service Depot 201 in Montreal. And lo and behold, I think it says I retired.
Well, I worked in the base post office, which basically we sorted all the mail for the Army and the Air Force to go overseas. Now, we didn't get much incoming mail, except when the ships went down, were torpedoed, and then we got that mail back, and we had to resort and organize it, send it back so that the sender could send, say, another parcel to the soldier it was meant for. If it was feasible that we could rewrap it, not too damaged, and send it on, we did. Otherwise, we just sorted the mail that went directly overseas, and we were notified ahead of time when they were being moved, say a unit like, well, Unit 636 in the Air Force, for instance. When it went to India, we didn't know it was going to India, but we knew it was being moved because it was all coded, of course. Well, there was some interesting things in some of the parcels that were listed as soldiers' comforts. Like a parcel would come soldiers' comforts, and there'd be lipstick or nylons because the girls over there in England couldn't get these things, and so the family would send to the sons to give to their, or brothers in my case, to give to their girlfriends that they had over there, because obviously we were all young, and so there was girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever. It was sad because people were naturally being, for instance, one of my brothers was wounded, and we didn't know where he was for a while, and we knew he was in hospital. They'd flown him back from France to England, but he came back from the war. And and I had two brothers who come back, so that was good. I would think millions of pieces of paper, because we had all kinds of these little airmail things, and I basically did one section for the Air Force. That was the part that I wanted to do, and that's the part that I did. So some of the other girls who were in the Air Force, there was 30 of us Air Force girls, because as you probably know, the post office was pretty much run by the Army. But
I didn't know that.
Yes, it was.
Well, I guess the Navy and the Air Force wouldn't be as useful as...
We didn't do the Navy mail. They did theirs separately. And if we got Navy mail, someone picked it up every day and took it to the naval headquarters where they sorted their own mail. There was 1,000 of us worked in that building, because there was several levels to the building. I was on the letter level, and I did go up to the newspaper level for the last little while I was there. And then, of course, I went on to Winnipeg before I was discharged and worked in the base post office, not base, the one on the base. Mind you, postage was a lot more reasonable back then.
Can you remember how much it was? For
3 cents.
3
cents to send a letter.
Wow.
Because our wages were $30 a month. But remember, we were supplied with food, lodging, clothes, because other than, you know, our undergarments, everything was supplied for us.
So you lived together with a group of women.
800 of us in a barrack, in a block in Ottawa.
How did you get to know anybody?
Well, there was 30 of us in one section, and you knew pretty much, yeah, you knew all those girls in that section, because you intermingled too in the mess hall. Used a lot of stamps though, because I wrote to a lot of friends and relatives and whatever, and we used these basically for any of the overseas stuff, and I had a lot of relatives in England and Wales, so that I wrote to, like both in the service and aunts and uncles, aunts and cousins and whatever.
That when I served in Korea 50-51, it's completely different than what you see there now. It was a very difficult country with little supplies, a lot of casualties, shortage of food, and which way is the war going to go, nobody knew. There were 60,000 people, Canada, killed in World War I, and in World War II there were 40,000 Canadians killed, and just over 500 were killed in Korea because of the war. And we are still the third largest number of casualties in our history.
Wow.
But is that when you had they had to call in the artillery fire onto your position? Is that sort of around what happened?
Yeah.
They fired on you? Oh, it fired around you so that you could retreat? Wow.
That's basically how a lot of these guys lost their hearing. And who was in charge of the artillery? Was it the Australians?
Yes.
So they actually called, because they were worried the Chinese were overrunning them, they called in friendly fire, in other words, on their position. So it actually was right around where they were, and it damaged their ears.
That I've got hearing aids here provided by the Defense Department. And it's quite interesting because we had so much fire from the Chinese that when we were defending ourselves against the noise of artillery, machine guns, tank fire, etc., we were so badly hit by noise that we had blood running down our sleeves from our ears. But a few years later my hearing got worse and worse. And today, unless I wear my hearing aids, as my wife will tell you, that I'm rather stupid, because I don't hear that much because of loss of hearing.
Wow.
So that is one thing he did leave in Korea.
Was his hearing?
Yeah, was his
Yeah,
hearing.
not many are surviving, because only 6 of us are left alive, and some didn't get into that heavy fire. And that was near the end of the battle.
Now, tell me more about, you said you were a defense attaché, in other words, a spy.
Yeah, military attaché, that's right. And I was serving in South Korea, but I also served at the DMZ as Canada's representative at the peace talks. I guess that would have been probably 82 to 84.
Right.
Wow. So now, my concept of a spy is like James Bond, somebody sneaking around the back doing things, but that's not what spying's about at all, is it?
Well, it has many sides, many sides.
But I think mainly there's other attachés, you know, with the embassies, and basically you sort of get together and talk about different things, and that's how you gain intelligence.
Oh.
You know, I think that's basically how you do, talking to other military people.
Plus, we got information
Americans.
achieved or taken by other spies. And then when we arrived, we were put up in the mountains, And as a matter of fact, in the water, there were dead bodies floating all around the place. And then from there, we got ready and we moved north. And we fought our way up into North Korea. Then the Chinese came in great numbers. And then we were forced back down. Not back into Busan, but very close to it. And then we fought our way north again.
So how much ammunition did you have? What did you get down to when you had to retreat?
Well, that's hard to say because we didn't know whether we were going to survive. So some people had run out of ammunition. Others had quite a bit because they were not in the area where the Chinese were attacking. And then all of a sudden we thought, we were talking about it, we were informed we may have to leave because we're going to be, and then we got word that the Chinese had withdrawn. And we got the United States presidential citation for that. And believe it or not, the records show that we're the only unit in the history of the wars that got a presidential citation. Armored Corps people didn't arrive until after later. We were a lone battalion there.
Oh.
About 200 strong in 1951. And then in the fall of 51, the other 5,000 Canadian armed forces in different parts of the forces arrived.
Well, I think, you know, that, but they were young, and John joined to go for adventure, and he certainly got adventure. But, you know, Korea, where that battle, the Kapyong battle was, is quite mountainous. There's fields, and then there's quite a few mountains.
Now, I've taken Judy up to where...
Yeah, we actually, when we were there in the 80s, we used to hike up in that area.
I even found my slip trench with Judy when we went out. And,
You're kidding.
I fell in the hole, didn't I?
It was all filled in with leaves and stuff, but he was walking along, and all of a sudden he sort of went into this depression. And he said that was his where he was actually.
That was a slip trench.
Yeah.
Full name.
My mother's first name was Marjorie Calver. She grew up in Manitoba on a dirt poor depression farm. She was one of 7 children. She was in the middle, and her father died at a fairly young age, and several years after that her mother passed away. Her mother died. And all the family, the 7 children, were divided up and had to go to different relatives. Some of the children went to the West Coast. Some of them went to a farm in Saskatchewan. And my mother ended up, I think she was about 16. She went to a family in Winnipeg and was in service to this family in Winnipeg, where she had to kind of do housework and food preparation. And she was certainly an expert at that because she helped raise the younger of the children. And so she had a very difficult life. And
The war must have been kind of a good thing for her.
I think it was, she often talked about it as being a lifesaver in a way, because it got her away from this family. She decided to join the Air Force. Unfortunately, she only had a level grade 8 education, actually didn't even finish grade 8 because she ended up having to take care of her younger brothers and sisters because the mother and father passed away. And so she actually found and got in contact with a family friend who actually vouched for her, that said that she actually passed grade 8 so she could join the Canadian Air Force.
Wow. Now, the things you have are quite interesting. Tell me about the hat and the tie and everything.
Well, after the war was over, she joined the Canadian Legion, was always very proud of her years in the war. And these are memorabilia from the Canadian Legion, her tie, her beret, her different crests, and of course the medals that she received from her wartime service. She was in the post office, and she actually traveled from Winnipeg and ended up in Montreal and in Toronto in the post office as part of the Air Force. I think she was really happy that she actually had a paying job. Somebody paid her. She had room and board, and it was a whole really kind of a new freedom for her. Yes, she returned to Winnipeg and worked in Winnipeg, and she spent a number of years in Winnipeg getting back in touch with her family and her sisters. And then she went up to northern Manitoba to work, and because one of her brothers was up there, and that's where she met my dad and married my dad. They lived in northern Manitoba. My father was a fur trapper and a trader, and he ended up buying a trading post in a town called Nelson House, which is way northern Manitoba, up, and it's where my brother and I were both born. Her oldest brother, Uncle George, he was also in the RAF, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and he was flying a plane in, I'm not sure whether it was early on in the war or in the middle part of World War II, and he was a tail gunner and had his legs shot off. And I have an article here that's about him and going back, and he was anxious to get back in the war. And the article is with Marshal Bishop, and I think that is actually Billy Bishop. I think so. Yeah.
Did he get back in the war?
Not as a pilot or not as a gunner, but he was involved in the war in a different aspect of that.
When you came over from England as a war bride, you came by ship.
Queen Mary.
The Queen Mary?
Yeah. It was still as a troop ship. So I was married at 19. Yeah.
What was a wartime wedding like?
So we had a church wedding, and it went just the same as they do today, really. Except I didn't have a white gown and everything. I just had a dress. Because coupons, you're only allowed so many coupons a year, and a coat, a pair of shoes was 7. So a lot of us bought clogs, which was for regular day, and actually they were quite comfy. They were only 5, so you had to balance your coupons because you didn't get any more. You had to plan, because if you wanted a pair of shoes, that's 7, and I forget how many coupons we had. It wasn't a lot. And if you had nylons, which we didn't, they were 3, a pair of nylons. I remember when my husband was in the Navy, as I told you, and he was on guard this one night, and a torpedo came within, just as he thought they'd had it, but it veered off and went to the side, but it was coming straight for the ship, and then it veered off. I don't know what caused it to veer off, I don't know. And I don't care, but he did.
What was his job in the war?
He was just an able seaman. He wasn't one for climbing the ladder. He just wanted to do his service and then get out. Yeah. They were escorting convoys. And then his ship got pulled out of that, and they escorted, I don't know how many U-boats that they'd got, the Germans, and they escorted them back to England. He was born on a farm in Saskatchewan, and when he was 19 or something like that, they came out here and lived in Cheminius in a place for a little while, and then they bought property up Watts Road, built it, my husband and 2 of his uncles built this house for them. So they moved there, and there was 5 acres, I think. So after, we were married, my husband bought an acre back off them, and that's where he built our home. And so we had an acre of land.
So you have lived in Ladysmith
for a long time.
for a long, long time.
Well, it was called Saltaire where I lived then,
Right.
but it is Ladysmith now. in that
Ladysmith
area.
area.
Yeah.
This is his birth certificate.
That's his birth certificate.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. Oh, so delicate.
And really,
And what is the date on this?
here it is.
Right down at the bottom. 1907.
Yep, he was born on July, I think it was July or August 15th, something. Yeah, he was in the Second World War.
Second World War. That's his grave?
That was the grave until they got the better ones, like this metal ones, when the first was buried.
That was when he was first buried, because all the cracks
Yep,
in the soil.
and then they put the new cemetery all together with it.
1943. So you were very young when he went off to war. You'd only be
Well, I was born in 36.
young.
Well, I was 4 years old.
4
then
years
to the change when he left and that too. So that's how, 7 years.
Now you were saying to me that your dad was born in Ladysmith.
Yes, he was born in Ladysmith. That's right there.
Wow. 1907.
Well, that's what happened. The family decided to leave Scotland. But these are little things that he's had and kept and tried to get it. And this was a little purse my dad sent out from Scotland.
Oh, lovely.
But it's pretty old and worn.
Oh, but these are the treasures, aren't they?
And this one, it needs to be stitched. And he gave me, my
Bagpipes
sister,
and a hat.
yeah, Ginger didn't get the same color as I did, but that's it. Did get.
FRAE, what does that mean?
I have no idea.
It wouldn't be Free Bonnie Scotland.
Could be,
We're
but
going to be looking that one up. Now that says that Second World War service. Oh, volunteer service. And those are all the volunteers going on.
oh my gosh.
That is just amazing. Wow.
There's just that. I'm not sure what it was, but
Kuditchy Rich, 72. Man,
and that was
this is him.
that is him again.
Oh my,
Yeah.
what a handsome fellow.
He lost a lot of stuff in their cabin. They lost, got burnt, everything burnt, but he did have the old watch.
Oh wow, look at the watch.
They're old, just like us. A lot of people in Scotland, and that was during a 1943 years.
Oh.
He gave me that, and it's mine on the back, and Ginger has one too, just a different one.
1943.
So these are nice to have.
Yeah, and
That's right. And these things used to save them. I don't know if they're cigarettes or what it was, but the senior service cigarettes, yes. So they all came from pictures back there that he gave us. So that's pretty
So
good.
obviously, looking by the number of them, he was a smoker.
Oh, I think he
I think
was.
everybody was a smoker.
Well, I think they were because it was supposed to relax them.
Yes. Oh boy, look at the shoes.
Yes. Aren't they something?
Wow.
They're not mine. They were his.
Those
Or
were his
something.
baby
Well,
shoes.
that's what my grandparents said, but I don't know. Maybe they just meant they're mine. 'Cause I used to have them Packard size 3, but they're fruit.
Wow. Aren't they amazing? Oh, yeah.
But maybe they were me. But I can't remember them. I can't remember having them. Oh,
Those are
cute.
just lovely.
And these were. Oh, that's a 5th birthday. A 6th.
Oh, aren't
That's the only
they
2 I got from
wonderful?
Scotland was the 5th and 6th. My sister got them, the other ones when she's younger.
What a
But that was neat.
treasure. Today you are 6. It's all the little dog. The little dog.
Aren't they
looking at the
cute?
hedgehog.
Kind of remind me the little white ones that are around here. And then this was a postcard that he sent to our mum.
Oh, lovely.
Ginger and I were born in Vancouver, and Dad was going overseas, so then we got into Cheminius, And we were just young there. We were just that age when he went to Scotland there for that. We never seen him again after that. So it was damn, but I keep looking at the pictures thinking what he's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He must have been a lovely man to send you all the cards.
He was really good. Well, there was a relationship there too, so. This is our little storybooks we're supposed to read on a Sunday when we went to church. he did that, sent it.
Wow.
Certain little things were good for the church.
The death certificate?
Yeah, there's lots of stuff at the time.
Where did he pass?
Hmm?
What part of Europe did he pass in?
Him passing?
Yeah.
In Sicily.
Sicily.
Yeah.
Did he enjoy Europe? Did you?
He enjoyed the people. Yeah. The family. They still had so much family back there. Oh, the Mercer family. Wow. And Grandma's Parker. That's her maiden name. And these are all the little...
Those are all the clippings, the notices of his...
Yeah, like Vancouver Island man wounded in Sicily, but I don't... Yeah, he got... And then he was killed after. He was killed in action.
Irene's nephew Kevin from Arizona traveled overseas to see Hugh Mercer's gravesite in 2006. He photographed the site and made a rubbing of the stone. Such a kind act for his family. Virginia at the Shawnigan Lake Legion shows me photographs and equipment of a Legion member who recently passed. She tells me there was no one left to inherit this material, and so it was donated to the Legion. No one present there remembers him. This, I realize, will be my next project to identify, curate, and display his story. Our last story is close to home. I live near the tiny village of Cobble Hill. It has a wonderful cenotaph that was built by the residents after the First World War. Beside the monument was a German trench cannon. Like any object brought back from a war, this was a visible sign of warfare and triumph. At the outbreak of the Second World War, in a fit of zealous recycling, the cannon was spirited away and melted down to aid the war effort. This reminds us that objects and images that return from wars are perceived in different ways over time. We look forward, we look back, but our gaze is always changing.